Welcome, Tim. It's good to see you.
Great to see you too.
Yeah, it's almost holiday time and it's great to have you here. If you don't mind, Tim, give our audience a brief introduction of you, your background. A lot of people know you, but maybe some. Can
Maybe
you?
some don't.
Yeah.
Yep. Tim Brown, CISO for Solarwinds. Been there for about 8 years. We had a pretty major incident about 5 years ago that put us in the news. So for the past 5 years, we've been working to go through that and really, navigate that whole incident. Then about 3 years ago, I was charged by the SEC. That kind of made me a household name among security people. And just last week, the full case was dropped. So exciting news for everybody.
Yeah, I think Tim's underselling the importance of this case and how much we all in the security community cared about it. Uh, and there was so much about the case that we hopefully can unpack in this little conversation. But um, two things stood out for me that I want to recognize Tim for. One was that when the incident happened, it happened in, I guess, 2020, the security incident, and the company handled it and communicated with their customers. And then it was almost more than 2 years later that the SEC came in and brought these charges. And I thought it was a testament to Tim that his company stood behind him, even though there had been a transition of CEOs from the time of the incident to the world post-incident. They stood by him. And I said this on another call yesterday with Tim. Like there's no greater scrutiny and pressure than you can be under than being in a situation that gets the whole world looking at it multiple years afterwards. And the fact that the company stood by Tim through it all tells us a lot about how he must have handled himself back in advance of the incident and during the incident and after the incident. So the fact that the company's chosen to stand behind him and support him all the way through is really it's a nice thing from the perspective of the company, but it's a great testament to who Tim is. And then the second important thing is that Tim, he's coming out of it. Sure, he's a week since the case is over, but he hasn't been invisible. A lot of the times when you have this heavy weight hanging over you, you have a tendency to want to go and hide, especially when you have your own lawyers who tell you to go, don't say anything. You know, I think he ignored a lot of advice probably from lawyers, or he worked very hard with those lawyers to get them to get comfortable with him talking. But this is far from the first time I've gotten to share a microphone with Tim to talk about his case.
Yeah. So on the company side, the company has stayed with me through the whole thing, which has been incredible. But also our investors changed, right? So at first we were public. But majority owned by Silver Lake and Tomo Bravo. So they still owned 80% of us. So they were supportive of our approach and very supportive. And then private since last February or so. And again, Turn River supportive of our approach, supportive of us, moving forward. And, the company was unwavering, right? And, we had potential off-ramp opportunities and other things, but it was always, drop Tim and we'll consider settlement. So that's just the way the company treated it. And what an interesting story was we were going through mediation and trying to get to a settlement. And the mediation judge asked me to step out of the room for a minute. And so I stepped out, my attorney stayed in. And what she asked our general counsel was, why are you so hung up on having Tim drop from the case? And his answer was pretty simple. He said, because he didn't do anything wrong. That's all. The company standing behind me has been incredibly helpful, and I couldn't imagine going through it without it. It would have been horrendous.
When you say the company was behind you, was supportive of your approach, can you just give us a brief description of what the approach was as opposed to alternatives?
Yeah, absolutely. So the approach for transparency to start with, right? So how can we be transparent? How can we share? I thought it was very important to educate people around what a nation state does and a true nation state attack and talk about it. And I was given enough latitude to go out and talk to it. And I still stayed within the lines of what we had written, but I could give color around the outside edges of that. Color really helps people understand what did they do? How did they do it? Then all the legal proceedings. I couldn't talk about the sensitive nature of things sometimes, but just the process that we were going through. People didn't understand the process. They didn't understand what was involved in discovery. They didn't understand everybody would grab every single email you've ever had and the whole company's set of email and Teams and Slack and phones and do all of those things and then, search it for things. People just didn't understand that. So educating people around the process and keeping people up to date with the process. Um, During a motion to dismiss, you can't introduce new evidence. So people say, well, why didn't you fight this thing from, of course, when you said they accused us of not having access control ish. And why couldn't we present new evidence then? Just simply because you can't at that stage in the process. So they have 5 emails that show that we had, issues with somebody getting the wrong access out of 10,000 people getting onboarded and offboarded. And those 5 were picked up during audit. So we had a process. But for them, they could say, yeah, you have a systemic problem. Those 5 show that you have a systemic problem. So things like that are just interesting from kind of how a legal process works. And so to share that was helpful to folks.
Yeah, since you talked about how, they picked up a few things and pushed on that as evidence for the maturity of your program, your security program, do you think throughout this process, right, now that you know what you know, do you think the SEC actually has any fundamental misunderstanding of how a security organization?
No question. No question. The question of what a chief information security officer does or a head of security does, a layman could interpret that as, oh, they have ultimate power. They're a chief. They must fix everything, do it all themselves. They have ultimate power to do whatever they want. And we all know that's not true, right? We often recommend things, and then you have an IT department that goes change things, or a research or an engineering department that goes change things. So their interpretation of what the responsibility was, off from the truth, right? I was held accountable for disclosures. I sat and helped. Maybe I talk a little bit in a disclosure meeting, or really the first one was right after our incident. But by no means was I the authoritative source that was the one that said, hey, disclosure is ready to go. That was the legal team. That was the finance team. That was others. I was part of a committee. But again, their interpretation was, oh, well, this was your responsibility to get it right. So there's a lot of misconceptions about kind of what the job is. And that bled into a lot of the charges, right? The misconceptions of the charges of the position.
So the charges are ultimately dropped, right? And also taking a step back, just for those that may not be as familiar with the case, the charges were brought against you personally, right, Tim? Not
Yeah,
against the company as a whole, right?
both.
Or both. Okay,
Both. So there's charges against me and charges against the
against
company.
the company.
So, but they come in the same complaint. But there's, I am named and the company is named. No other individuals were named.
So the charges were dropped. The charges against you were dropped, or both are dropped?
Both were dropped.
Both were
Yeah,
dropped.
so charges were dropped against me, and then charges were also dropped against the company. So the full case is dropped with prejudice, means that they cannot go back and retry. This is the final closure.
So
Right.
Tim, can I ask a
Yeah.
follow-up question on the charges? Like, obviously, my case, your case, and then the cases we've seen since. Like, the Department of Justice has continued to bring some civil fraud cases around people in cybersecurity, but there's a consistent pattern, which is it's focused on the role of it's focused on how the company is representing their security posture to the government. Uh, what is your takeaway in terms of how security leaders should think about this pattern, and these series of cases, and the fact that, like, historically maybe we didn't think it was in the scope of our role to be paying attention to everything that the marketing team says about us.
Yeah, I think it is important because public statements in any form end up being questioned. Public statements end up being looked at whether right or wrong, right? Whether it's posturing, whether it's just marketing, whether it's a security statement. Um, all of those things get questioned after the fact. So, very important to pay attention to those, very important to have them reviewed by your legal teams, very important to have them be appropriate and not overselling. Um, so there's a line there, but definitely important for security people to understand what is being represented in the in the external world on security. There was a lot of talk about kind of what some of the marketing material kind of meant, and the lawyers used, I'm trying to remember, it was a good term. Puffery was the term. And puffery, yes. So puffery is, oh, well, that's what this is. This is selling. It's not a statement of fact. It's a statement of for marketing or something. It's a puffing up of a statement. And those should not be considered that you were representing, a legal opinion or major opinion of things. But still, I think the questions of puffery is interesting, where that fits and what it doesn't fit, and whether your marketing people are, if they're out there lying, right? That's definitely not a good thing, and it's not a good thing for the security people, especially if they're tied to it.
This is a question that's been on my mind, Tim, that the dismissal came, but they were framed as being taken in the exercise of discretion. There's no concession of error or liability
No.
admitted by the SEC. So are you satisfied with this outcome, or do you believe they should at least make some form of a concession?
So the I actually look at it in a little bit. I give the SEC a little bit of grace here. I don't have this for a fact, okay? But um, if you look at the SEC's primary objective to be able to, one of their objectives from a cybersecurity perspective was raise the cybersecurity presence of public companies and raise the level of cybersecurity that they looked at. So when you think about it, when they looked at our case, they said this could be a fundamental case that they could go after and they could potentially set some precedents on. But even if they lost, they put CISOs on notice. And by charging me, it made an impact, right? It made boards wake up. It made executive teams wake up. It made people say, do we have a CISO? What do they do? How do we involve them with things? So it really did help public companies and raise awareness of cybersecurity within public companies. Even though they lost in the end, it really did work. If they had just charged the CEO or the CFO, it would have been a non-event. It would have been, okay, from a cybersecurity perspective, it would have been nothing. By charging me, it actually had had value in the end. So,
Incredibly kind, Tim.
but it's true, right? It really is true.
I agree. Like in a weird way, the SEC has 100% accomplished what they set out to do, which is raise expectations around cybersecurity. I do think the next time they they will hope, and what I hope is that they have learned the lesson that next time, if they need to aim at a little bit higher than the security leader alone. Like there's like as Tim said, we don't get to control the budget. We don't get to control the culture of the company around risk, and so much other that we don't get to control. Uh, but we do need the leadership of the company around us to understand that the company as a whole is going to be held accountable, and it starts at the top. Sarbanes-Oxley, which is
Yep.
an area that the SEC looks closely at. The CEO and the CFO have to sign on the line. The frustrating thing for Tim and for everybody who saw Tim go through the pain that he had to go through was that like the SEC is essentially doing this through precedent because we don't have legislation.
Right.
Uh, it would be much better if there was an equivalent of a Sarbanes-Oxley. As far as I'm concerned, I would like to see a Sarbanes-Oxley for security, a simple one, but
Yep.
like where the CEO has to join the security leader on signing on the line, because it's only then that will really drive accountability to the boardroom and to the top of corporations. And until then, I think a lot of security leaders are still nervous. Like Tim, I'm sure you get contacted by people all
Absolutely.
the time asking, should I do this job? How do you
Yeah.
talk to them?
Yeah. And, the job is still incredible, right? And it has a lot of meaning. And without it, our companies would be at great risk. So, and I think today there's a number of things that people can do to control some of their liability, right? Great job description, document everything, make sure that you have. When I say great job description, that includes what you do and what you don't do, right? I am a member of the disclosure committee. That does not mean I make decisions about disclosure, right? I am a member of a committee. I I make recommendations. That doesn't mean I can always have those recommendations followed, but I do make recommendations, right? I, communicate to my management staff. That doesn't mean my messages flow through to the executive team. So a number of things could be stated that hopefully can help if anything ever comes up legally. But I'm a big fan of getting to some type of Sarbanes-Oxley model for CISOs. I think it would give a safety net. I think it would give audit. I think that audit could give a good baseline of a good security controls and practices are being followed. And I don't think it needs to necessarily be super onerous to get to that level, but it would give cover for the CISOs to be able to make sure that they can appropriately communicate. It's hard to when you start getting hung up on the risk associated with words you're using. It's very hard to do your job well. And it's very hard to communicate risk. It's very hard to go through and say, hey, things need help. Um, so it's very important that not everybody gets stuck in that rut of saying, well, I'm just going to, go along and not make waves and not kind of do my job, right? Because that's what our job is. It's to highlight risk and see risk getting fixed and do it again and do it again and do it again. So it's very important for us to be able to do that and then have appropriate kind of safety net out there. So I am hoping that we can get through to some folks and start having conversations of what a good model would look like.
I know, Joe, you've talked about that it will be a great service to the community if we have a sort of standardized job description for the CISO, right? And what he or she, what his or her responsibility scope is, and what they are in charge of, what things they collaborate on. Do we have any? Have we made any progress in that as a community?
There's been a lot of efforts, but I think they all get bogged down for a couple of different reasons. One is that, like, let's be honest, the profession is really new and the role is really new and it's still evolving. And as a result, so many of us who have been in the role, we come from different backgrounds. We would argue with each other more than with anyone else over like who's qualified for the role and what do they need to be successful in the role. And then, like, if you look across corporations, the role reports up like some place it reports to a technical leader, some place it reports to a risk leader, meaning like the general counsel or the CFO. Sometimes it reports directly to the CEO. It's all over the place, and so we have to get our house in order a little bit, and then maybe there's another part to it, which is the job is fundamentally different in different industries to a certain extent as well,
Yeah.
because they're like if you look at financial services, the job is very different than the companies that I worked in, tech companies, where we're dealing with like large engineering teams doing innovative things and financial services handling people's money. And so there's a whole set of regulators who've gotten hands on around cybersecurity and financial services that just doesn't exist over in this tech corner. And it's different in Europe and it's different in Asia and so on. And so we've struggled. But like Tim says, like you can write a job description for the specific role that you're taking. I've seen that people say that's a good best practice as you're going into a role to have a back and forth with the company and defining the scope of your responsibility. And in particular, I think because of the risk we're talking about, the focus should be on communication about security because that's where like right now it seems like a large percentage of the risk is around not how well you did the security job, but how well you manage how the company talked about it.
Yeah. Um, and Tim, we talked about this can be a Hollywood documentary, right? Your case and your experience. And we were on the call yesterday. There was a discussion of who gets to play you. Uh, what is your pick for a Hollywood actor to play you?
I don't know. I like the idea of Morgan Freeman. That was pretty cool.
Morgan?
He'd make a
Oh,
good me. Um, yeah. So yeah. I mean, it is a story, right? A nation state attack doesn't happen very often, or doesn't get publicized very often, right? So we have few kind of public areas, and it becomes a little spy movie, right? Of why they're trying to get there, what they're trying to get. We become a route to that, and yeah, then all of the all the theatrics that go around the outside. So make a good documentary.
Tim, do you think that the decision to be transparent at the time was something that invited more scrutiny or that gave you more support?
Um, so from the SEC,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it probably invited a little bit more, right? I was enough of a face out there that I would think that it said, okay, well, Tim's pretty public. He's out there. He's going to keep going, and that's what we really want, right? We don't want it to be quiet. We do want it to be public and to be able to make a difference. At least that's what I would be thinking, right? That so if I had somebody that was just going to sit in the back room and not talk and just be doing their thing, then that probably wouldn't have been as useful, right? So um, I expect some people were thinking, right? And because we were forced to be public, right? We had no choice, right? It was on 60 Minutes the day after it happened, and it spread across the world. And countries call you and everyone calls you. So we're on the phone talking to everybody just without choice. And then we did consciously make a choice to be able to, you know, push publicly to every group that would listen to us. So we did all of that during the incident. And then, so it did become very well known that we had made a precedent of we're going to talk. Um, so from, if I was the SEC, I would have been thinking, oh, interesting. Okay. So they're going to be, they'll talk about things. So I think it probably did play a factor in it.
Um, any point during this whole experience, did it ever get too much for you? Personally, you're the face of a big incident, you're target of a government lawsuit. So what's the personal cost?
So the heart attack did. The week that I was charged, right? I was in Zurich, and I had a heart attack, and I was stupid enough to fly home, and then ended up with a 90% blockage in one artery, 75% in another, but all better. So what I didn't realize is the stress was building up, right? And I should have gone through stress tests, and I should have been proactive on my health during that period of time because, although I thought I was feeling it and I thought I was dealing with it fine, it really was all building up. And so that was the big one. That was the big one. Um, I got to the point of just, especially after the heart attack, it was like, yeah, other people are driving the boat. They're doing fine. We're going down a river. I'm just a passenger. I'll help the lawyers when I can, but it's really completely out of my control. And if I have to pay a fine and be barred from an officer and a director, I will, and I'll survive it. So once you get to acceptance, it helps to be able to manage some of it. But it is a path.
What were the things that helped you?
Yeah, the community really helped, right? And people really helped. And so I I don't recommend people do this. That's the first thing. But I compartmentalize. I very much compartmentalize, and I don't bring this stuff home. Um, I live on a farm. I have, horses, little mini donkeys. I can go hug them. But that's my stress relief. That's my safe place. That's what my wife said. She said, I know this is your safe place, but if you have to talk to me, you can. But I didn't cross over very much. That's just the way that I dealt with it. So I would yell at my CISO friends and other community people and that type of stuff and use them as my sounding board. But my home was a completely different kind of space. So as she says, my work voice is on or my normal Tim the farmer voice is on. So that has kept me sane for the last 30 years. I've always had that kind of model. So I didn't change it when this happened. But community saved me. Even internally, one of the things people don't understand. So from the company perspective, the only ones that worried about the legal stuff was the legal team, my general counsel, my CEO, and me. So we didn't hold all hands and updates. I talked more externally about things than I did internally. Internally, we needed the company focused on getting better, right? We needed the company focused on where it was going, not this incident that occurred. So definitely did not try to drive, support with inside. I got support inside, but we just didn't, we didn't allow that to disrupt the company. So it was very important for me not to do that, right? Because we were on a recovery path.
So it was also kind of didn't become all consuming because you had other focuses, right?
Exactly.
I have to say
Exactly.
you did an incredible job throughout this ordeal because you've always engaged with the community. You never sort of went away and hide, and you faced it head on. I don't know if many others would do the same. So it's
But you
and
have to remember the community support was my therapy. It really was, right? Because the story is a good enough story. You got out of it. People got things from it. So every time I talked, people were, thankful, right? They were happy that I shared. They were truly got something out of it. So that side of the world, why I say it was therapy, it really was. It was able to, just talk to people about what went on, give them some good knowledge, and then it gave me some, I'm an introvert by my I've been learned not to be one, but the sometimes by choice, right? But it's okay, right? If I can help people and do things better, then it's great. So community was so strong in this that without everybody, I would have just been lost.
yeah, and for Joe too, right? You've experienced the support of the community, and this community is a tight knit and very supportive community. And I feel lucky you are part of this community.
I think it's unique in corporate America and maybe corporate globally, because I spend a lot of time talking with security leaders around the world, and I see over and over the kind of selflessness of the community in terms of everybody knows, there but for a couple of breaks go I, in every one of these situations, because none of us can deliver perfect security. And there's not an easy book to follow to do security well, and it's different in every environment. We talked about it's different where we report and the expectations on us. So it's a very challenging job that's evolving very quickly. The risks are getting bigger, not smaller, and the importance to the world of what we're doing goes up every single day.
Yep. And I think we give each other, because of that, we give each other some grace, right? We're not quick to jump and say, oh, well, you were incompetent in what you did because your security wasn't good enough. I think we say, yeah, I'm sorry it happened to you. Could have happened to me the next week. Because there's, as everybody always says, they only need to be right once. We need to be right every time. And nothing's perfect. So I think the folks that are in the trenches realize that. And, when something bad happens, the folks, especially the folks that have been around for a while, they're not going to go, you know, point fingers at you. They might try to help you figure out how you could have done better, but by no means think, that things are incompetent.
There's certainly very strong camaraderie in the community, and that's very evident in both of your cases, I think. I know we have limited time today. I only have one more question left. I don't know if Joe has anything else to ask.
I just want to say thank you to Tim for all he's done for the community. We're talking about the importance of community. If he didn't show up and talk about it, we would have been talking without him there, but we wouldn't have been as well informed. And so it's important that he's made himself
Yeah,
available.
so one of the things that's really strange, people want selfies with me.
I've done selfies
You've
with
done selfies with me, yes.
So you do
But
selfies with
all over the
everyone.
world. I mean, I go to Australia and people want selfies. I go to Israel. It's like crazy.
because
But
you're a nerd celebrity. There's the nerd famous and there's the famous. So you're very you've done really well in the nerd
I've
famous.
got my own little niche of celebrityism. Yes.
Well, it's because of what you did. It's
Yeah,
because you showed up and you didn't run away. It didn't happen. It didn't happen to you. You brought it on yourself by the way you conducted yourself through this whole process.
yeah. I think I actually posted on LinkedIn earlier that I said I've always known you as a soft-spoken person, Tim, and now I know there's like such strength underneath the soft-spoken surface. And we've all seen how you conducted yourself throughout this. And kudos to you, and thank you so much for the example you set for the community. I just want to say one last thing is what gives you hope for the future of security leadership?
Yeah. So I am actually very hopeful. The next few years are going to be very interesting, and not just security leadership, but technology-wise. We've got to use AI to get an advantage for us. And I think if we rethink how we're doing security, a lot of thought right now is going into, replacing the tools that we already use and making them more efficient, right? Which is fine. Good idea. It'll save us some money. But I really think we have to work on how we use, AI to change our game, empower us differently, make us a harder target. Uh, Many different things that we could be doing there that kind of embrace complexity and expect us not to be perfect everywhere, but limit damages, so resilience essentially. And then I think from the security leadership function, I think we'll get there, right? We're only 30 years old or so. So we're babies. So we'll keep growing, we'll keep maturing. And we keep looking at, this is just another step. So we got through this step. Now we have to get some folks excited about, some rules for us maybe. And then we look at, having certification, and then we look at audit, and we look at other things associated with the rules. So I just see us, maturing along this path, and we'll get better over the next few years. I don't see us, imploding by any means. And it's such a critical time, right? As I said, AI gives us opportunity, but AI is going to come at us. So we need security professionals in place to be able to help do that. It's not going to be the, tactical folks. It's going to be the thinkers that are going to be able to, think our way through this next few years.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. Certainly, it's been very interesting conversation and interesting time that we live in. And thank you, Joe. And congratulations again, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.